In this week's episode of Anxiety Slayer, we're responding to a listener question about a common struggle many people face managing the fear that comes with anxiety, and more specifically, the fear of anxiety or having an anxiety attack. And before we dig in, we'd like to give a shout out to Cynthia for supporting our work as a brand new patron. If you'd like to join Cynthia as a patron, you can do so and unlock a community of support, guidance, and inner calm, plus more than 200 downloads. Join today at patreon.com/anxietyslayer. Hey, Ananga,
Hey, Shan.
we got another excellent question from our Facebook group to talk about today, and that's how to release the fear of the fear. And I'll just share the question in full, and then we can go from there. And it says, I feel like even though I've conquered days, weeks, and even months, in the back of my mind, I'm anxious and restless of my anxiety coming back. It's as if I love to hate it, and that makes it linger longer. When I release and trust, my life gets easier. Sometimes, though, I get stuck in the panic of the panic coming back. I don't know if any of that made any sense. I hope it did. Sending you all love and light. Your podcast truly gave me the hope and support I have been searching for. Thank you. That was an excellent question and a lovely, kind word about our show.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. It's an excellent question. It makes total sense, I think, to anyone that's struggled with anxiety. The fear of the fear is something we've been asked about probably the most, I think, over the years. That and health anxiety. And there's so much can be said about it, that feeling that we've conquered days and weeks and even months, like we feel we've had a good spell, but just in the back of our mind is that haunting voice that's just there. You can just feel it behind you, casting doubt, casting a shadow. And when we focus on that, it definitely makes it stronger and makes it hang around. This is a great question. It really sums up what a lot of people go through with anxiety.
And I've noticed that there's some symptoms that can come along with this fear returning or the fear of the fear that we're talking about. And for each and every listener, it might be something a little bit different. But some anxiety sufferers might become dizzy or might feel like they could faint or might have trouble catching their breath or that they might lose control. And just the inkling of that, just getting up from your chair too quickly and for a moment being a little bit off can trigger something like, oh no, am I going to be okay?
Mm.
And chances are, yes, you are going to be okay. But if your mind comes in and decides that you're not, that's when the tools that we talk about all the time come into play, where you can just be like, you know what? I just got up a little too quickly. Just need to take a breath, take a minute. Or if it might be the catching your breath or having your heart racing. We've talked about that before, where it's perfectly normal if you exert yourself and feel your heart in your chest beating differently than it normally does. All those things that come up to have that, you've got this, it's going to be okay. But those symptoms take us to a place where we're not sure if we are going to be okay. And that's when anxiety can cause so much chaos in the body that our minds develop this strong reaction. And we're doing all we can to protect ourselves from having it happen again.
Yeah. And one of the ways the mind tends to do it is by reminding us, oh, you remember when you were here last time, or you remember when you felt like this last time. So we have this anxious hypervigilance. And one thing that can come with anxiety that's very challenging because it can often catch us off guard is this zooming in on any unwanted, unwelcome sensation in our body or thought in our mind. We identify with it, and then things can start to escalate so quickly. So it's like by acknowledging the thought and acknowledging the discomfort, we set something off inadvertently, but
Right.
it all gets fired off. And it's a very difficult thing because it can happen in a literally in a heartbeat. So it's really helpful to know that and to know that there are things you can do to change that. And it starts with not buying into the mind's dialogue and to really take practical steps to, understand how the fear of anxiety works and break that cycle down. So instead of jumping to the worst case scenario, which is what's happening here, the mind creates a dialogue. It kind of whispers in our ear, and we say, oh, what if you're right? What if it is that? And then that's it. We've gone. It's as if our feet get pulled from under us. So to take a step back, not zoom in and be hyper vigilant, but to take a step back and think, am I hydrated? Am I tired? Do I need to eat? Is it possible that my blood sugar's dropped? Have I had caffeine? Could it be that that's spiking something? I was talking to somebody the other day that had taken a painkiller with caffeine in it and then had a cup of coffee, and they felt off all day.
Oh, I bet.
Or their heart was a bit fast. They were finding it hard to concentrate. It was just a mistake. They didn't realize that the two had gone together like that. So to look at those things, and it can be helpful just to say to your mind, I'm not jumping to the worst case scenario, just to voice that, even out loud, or go and write it down and make that more solid than the fear thoughts. And then look, do I need to eat? Do I need to rest? Do I need to take a walk? Can I call a friend? Have I got something beautiful and inspiring to hand that I can read, or something I can listen to? And just let that thought stay where it is and fade out. But if we give it our attention, it will grow.
That reminds me of the short Patreon audio that I recorded last week about feeling jangly, feeling anxious, and realizing that I needed to move, to get away, to do something different, to change things up. And I went to the lakeshore. And it was just like as soon as I stepped into the sand and as soon as I listened to the waves crashing and took in the expanse of Lake Michigan, ah, everything just settled.
Such a relief, right?
It was such a relief. And I had two choices. I could stay in it and become really freaked out, or I could expand out of it by going somewhere that is my safe place. So whatever that looks like for you, it might be listening to music, it might be looking at art, it might be talking with a friend. For me, it's going to the lakeshore, and it really made such a difference.
And that's what we need to remember and zoom in on. What helps? What do I consistently do that can help me feel better, rather than just buying into the fear dialogue in the mind?
Yeah,
'Cause it's just this hypervigilant fear that's worrying. What if this happens again? How will I cope? Am I going to lose control? Am I going to pass out? Am I going to be stuck with anxiety forever? And none of those are facts. They're just thoughts. And there's
right.
so much we can do to help those possibilities not come into play. And one of them is by not buying into the dialogue and to be aware of the things we can do that help us, even if it means having it on a piece of paper on your fridge. And if you're going through a rough spell, to make your loved ones aware of it. Look, if I feel like this, can you bring me a cup of chamomile tea or some rescue remedy? Can you rub my back? Can you sit with me? Can you remind me to go for a walk? If you've got people around you that can offer you that support, that can be really helpful, just to break that close connection with the unhelpful thoughts that can come with anxiety. And it's also really important to understand that if we've had an anxiety episode and we are hypervigilant about it, it is likely to continue again. It's a bit like an earthquake where you get aftershocks afterwards. But again, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to last. And it doesn't have to be a thing where we wave the white flag and say, well, that's me. I'm just going to keep having these, because we can do things to stop the anxiety attacks and we can do things to stop that rumble afterwards. And it's really important not to put pressure on yourself and feel like you failed, or anxiety's back forever if you hit a rough patch, because that's not true either.
And we often talk about how important it is to address what's happening. And we've kind of touched on that a little bit, but if we try to avoid it, if we try to run from it, it's just going to dig its heels in deeper. So this is when we really need to be in that space of understanding that today might be a challenge, but tomorrow is going to be better. Or in this moment, I'm feeling kind of triggered. What do I know I can do about it versus just trying to avoid it, trying to push it down, trying to run, and realize that, oh no, if you don't address your fears, the impact that it can have on your life and on your relationships and on your mental health is just huge. So it's best to look at it head on and do the best that you can to look after yourself.
Yeah, avoidance can really back us into a corner. It can make our world shrink very quickly. And any of that anticipatory anxiety and that acknowledgement of fear, it feeds right back into the fear. And that's where we need help. One thing I learned a few years ago that really helped me understand this was to look at it as an equation. So if you have 1 and 1 equals 2, and 2 is an anxiety attack, if you change one of those numbers, you get a different outcome. So it could be like too much stress at work and not being able to go to my yoga class equals an anxiety attack. There's always more structure and reason to anxiety than we realize. It's not mysterious. There's something going on. And when we look at that something, we can make supportive, gentle changes. We can meet it head on and we can address it. So there's always things we can change. There's always something at play and there's always things we can change. And it might take a little while to start doing some self-care techniques, some breathing, tapping, yoga, whatever we choose, journaling. It may take a little while to really help us feel that support, but there are things we can do to change it. It's not a given that we have to have an anxiety episode and we're powerless against it. And I think even knowing that reduces the frequency of them, knowing that we're not powerless.
Sure. And especially in this case with the listener who wrote us, she'd been doing great for a really long time. And so that's a way to go, oh, wait a minute. You know what? I've actually been doing really well, feeling really well, looking after myself beautifully, and to give yourself credit for all of the space and time where you do feel balanced, you do feel good.
Yeah, stay in the light, stay positive. Because often we can be great for a while and then there's just something, a run of late nights, some stress coming in with work or family, some change. And it might be just below the surface of our awareness how that's impacting us. Sometimes we might get sick, we might get a cold or a virus, and it can lay us low. And those are all things that we need to factor in and just be compassionate, be self-compassionate and increase our self-care. Sometimes something happens. It's an unreasonable expectation to think that we're going to be okay all the time. That's just putting ourselves under pressure.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Do you have any? I find that it's easy to let my priorities slip when my schedule is packed with all kinds of responsibilities. And we all experience that at one time or another. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Therapy empowers you to be the best version of yourself. And it's not just for those who've experienced major trauma. Sometimes it's just for sorting things out, figuring out what is important to you. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and 100% suited to your schedule. Never skip a therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/slayer to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/slayer. Let's dig into some practical strategies that can help manage fear. And I liked that the equation that you shared with us before the break. But there's also some more to that story in that looking for what's different in your situation, what's new, what's good, what has changed, since the last time around when you were going back to that memory of something really snagging you?
Yeah, we give an example of this in our free course, which you can get at anxietyslayeracademy.com. We have a free course and we cover this in there. And the example's given of somebody that was in a shopping center and they were going to get some lunch and they were a bit late eating. So they were feeling just a little bit wobbly, perhaps some low blood sugar. And just as they rounded the corner to go to this area where they could get some lunch, they started to feel really unwell and shaky and faint. And they had to sit down and somebody bought them a cup of water. They were well taken care of, and eventually they got something to eat and everything was resolved. But when they went back there a couple of weeks later, they were just walking along in the same area, feeling absolutely fine. And as they rounded that corner, at the point where they'd felt unwell before, they started to experience anxiety. Fortunately, they were able to remember why. See, that's where it can seem so random. If you don't remember that, oh, yeah, I was here before and I was hungry and, I wasn't feeling so well, but people were kind and it was okay. That's remembering what's different now. Because the mind, when it's trying to protect, it will say subconsciously, hey, remember when you were here before, you felt really ill. And sometimes there's kind of this kinesthetic that comes with that. Don't go to that place, it's not safe.
Right.
And that can happen all beneath the surface of our awareness. But this person was able to remember, oh, last time I was here, I felt unwell. And they were able to carry on, just take a deep breath. And it wasn't a good feeling. They felt uneasy, but they were able to remember why and go and do what they needed to do. And it just faded out. So that's where we need to look for what's new, what's different, what's good now. Anything that's different in a positive way to a negative experience we've had before. Maybe we've learned more coping skills. Maybe we've got more tools. Maybe we're journaling and really taking good care of ourselves, really prioritizing our self care. But it's always good to just look under that narrative or feeling that comes up. And that's where we can break that fear equation because it wasn't the same situation the second time around. And she could see that. Otherwise, we might have an anxiety episode and think, my God, I was fine. I was having a good day. I just went to the shopping center. I was walking along, and all of a sudden it hit me out of the blue. It's never as out of the blue as we think.
Good point. Another practical strategy to manage fear is to be mindful and present as much as you possibly can. If you're present in the moment, if you're cooking something or you're in the garden or maybe you're writing or whatever it is you're doing, you're in conversation with a friend and you're present, you're there, you're not letting yourself go off on another tangent or another idea or another anxious thought. Being in that moment is going to reduce the fear of future anxiety because you keep inviting yourself back to it. It's kind of like when you're meditating and you catch yourself, you catch your mind floating away and you invite it back. You just invite it back and you invite it back as many times as you need to be in that space of whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah. And there's a really helpful, simple practice with that. It's a truth of the moment practice where we have these what if thoughts in our head. And if we credit them with any truth, they're going to get stronger and we're going to just suffer more. That's simply how it works. But if we can enter into the truth of the moment and we can tell our mind, this is what's true right now. I'm here and I'm doing this. So it can be I'm in the bathroom cleaning my teeth. I'm in the kitchen making tea. I'm in the kitchen preparing dinner. I'm in the garden pulling some weeds. I'm getting in the car to pick my kid up from school. This is what we know. This is what we're doing now. And if we can keep pulling our mind back with present moment awareness to those simple truths, it's like a negative propaganda where the mind's saying, what if, what if? And sometimes I'll just say to my mind, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. And sometimes my mind will push it to the worst case scenario and I'll just say, maybe. If I try and argue with it, it gets stronger. If I take it seriously, it really gets stronger. So maybe, maybe not. And I've seen people do that with toddlers when they're going through a really challenging spell. And you're just not buying into the story. Maybe, maybe not. Let's do this. Let's go for a walk.
Oh my gosh, I love thinking about our minds as being a little petulant child. It really does.
It takes the power away, but it can persist like a child that's having a tantrum. It can really push it. And if we just don't give it any energy at all, it's simple, but it really helps. It's one of the most helpful things I've learned.
And then breathing exercises are just the simplest, easiest practice to get you grounded, to get you back in your body and to calm your nervous system. Even if it's just a few deep belly breaths, it doesn't have to be anything more than that, other than, oh, you know what? I'm starting to feel a little bit out of my body. What do I know I need to do? Oh, okay. I'm going to take this nice deep breath. I'm going to hold it for a moment and I'm going to let this long exhale out. And I'm going to do that again and I'm going to do that again. And then, like magic, you start to feel more calm and relaxed. Well, it's not magic at all. It's just stepping in and doing what you know your body needs to calm your nervous system.
Yeah, because you're doing two things that help. One is that you're turning proactively to something that's calming rather than buying into the anxiety propaganda. And the other thing is that our rate of our breathing is directly connected to the rate and speed of our thoughts. So you slow your breathing down, you slow your thoughts down. It's very simple. And again, it's good to have an exercise that you like and you're familiar with so that you've got something there ready to go.
And then there's positive self talk. And we've mentioned this already in the episode of being that caring, loving adult who is looking after yourself instead of beating yourself up and why am I feeling this way and this is going to happen and getting yourself all spun up. Come to that place with being really sweet and saying, oh, honey, isn't that interesting that that's coming up right now? What do we know we can do? Or what if that's not even real? What if that's just something that you're buying into right now and or whatever the languaging is when you talk to yourself. I find myself being really extra sweet, sweeter than I've ever been, to just come back and almost like I'm giving myself an embrace and saying, yeah, I know this has felt a little upside down in the past, but that doesn't mean that that is the case now. What do you know you need to do? What do you know works in this situation? What have you done before type of a thing. And it's like talking to somebody you love. You're talking to somebody you love.
There's an opportunity there as well to improve our relationship with ourselves and improve our self talk. And sometimes with anxiety, one of the best things we can do is to see it as a challenge and rise to it. You know, I'm not going to be defeated. That's something I write in my journal often in the morning. I'm not giving up. I'm just going to keep learning and keep trying. And sometimes in the morning, I'll make a note in my journal. Today is a day of extra care. I can feel I'm a little off balance and I need extra care today. When we speed up, when we're out of balance, we start to wobble more. If we try and push through, we amplify the imbalance. So, yeah, positive self talk really helps. You might like to have some recorded or written affirmations that you can listen to or read. And again, have them to hand. Stick them on the fridge, keep them in a little journal that you keep in your pocket that you keep with you. Have things to turn to with you that you can just pull out in these challenging moments. It changes everything.
One of the affirmations that I really enjoy and think is helpful is I am what I am, and that is enough. I am what I am, and that is enough. I am where I am, and that is enough. So that we don't turn on ourselves and make things worse because you are who you are, and that is enough. Exactly as you are right now in this moment.
Yeah, the worst thing we can do is turn on ourselves. It causes so much internal stress, disappointment, all kinds of complex patterns that we can be running, and anxiety loves those. It's just going to feed on them.
And then, of course, a wonderful strategy to manage fear is tapping.
Yeah, one of the best.
One of the very, very best things that you can do is learn EFT tapping.
And you don't even need to learn it if you feel overwhelmed. Sometimes with anxiety comes overwhelm. You can learn it if you want. And we have several courses if you want to really explore it in depth. But we also have guided sessions. There's one in our free course that we mentioned at anxietyslayeracademy.com. There's a tapping session there. But we also have on our Patreon at patreon.com/anxietyslayer our SOS guided tapping sessions. One's just 3 minutes long. I think one's about 7 minutes long. So you can get those. And it's very to the point how to stop anxiety when it all feels too much, when everything feels too intense, too much. You feel like you're starting an anxiety episode. If you follow along with that tapping session, it will bring the anxiety right down very quickly.
Let's wrap up today by sharing some of the resources and why it's important to build a support system when you're struggling with the fear of the fear.
Yeah, I think it's like, if you're going on a trip, there's certain things you're going to want to know you have with you, especially if it's a trip where it's unfamiliar or you feel a little bit anxious about it. There are things that you're going to put on your list that you want to take. And we need that with anxiety. We need that Anxiety Slayer care kit. We need to lean into it with a sense of challenging anxiety and a little self support that we're going to try and do all we can to make this more comfortable. So, knowing when to seek professional support to notice and change our patterns, really helpful. Having something on your phone you can listen to, having a little self care pocketbook or journal where you've got techniques written down that have helped in the past. Just having those things to hand, maybe some Bart Flowers rescue remedy. In other episodes, we've shared how to create an Anxiety Slayer care kit and the things we recommend you have there. But just to have that support, things to listen to, things to read, breathing techniques, a few little items to carry with you. Again, that makes all the difference because there's a helplessness when we feel like anxiety can just come at us from nowhere and we don't know what to do. If we know what to do, if we've got some things to do, that's another way of breaking that anxiety equation and it leads to a completely different outcome.
Fear is natural. Let's just remember that too, that fear is a natural response, but it doesn't have to control your life. It doesn't have to be front and center. By understanding your fear, by addressing it head on, using some of the strategies that we've shared today, you really can reduce its power and live a more fulfilling, anxiety-free life. And before we go today, just a heads up, Ananga and I are taking a summer break for the next couple of weeks. And in lieu of replays, we're just going to have a hiatus. We'll be back in September with all new episodes for you. So please come back in September. And in the meantime, you can go back and revisit any number of our 705 episodes over the next couple of weeks. And thank you so much for listening. If you love our podcast, please consider exploring our Patreon for loads of Anxiety Slayer extras for calming anxiety, including exclusive posts, guided meditations, tapping sessions, and so much more. Learn more at patreon.com/anxietyslayer.